The billionaire did not find the woman who saved his son standing in a spotlight. He found her on her knees. It was just after midnight in the east wing of Mercyvale Children's Hospital, where the floors were polished so brightly that ceiling lights looked trapped inside them. Julian Rourke stood at the end of the hallway in a charcoal coat that cost more than most people's rent, unable to move, unable to speak, unable to understand how the most important person in his son's life could be the woman scrubbing blood from the tile with a rag in her hand. Her hospital badge had turned backward, hiding her name. Her gloves were too large. Her shoes were cracked at the sides. And the blood she was cleaning was not the only blood she had given that building. For 2 years, Amara Bell had walked into the hospital blood bank once a month after 12-hour night shifts. She had rolled up her sleeve, given a unit of AB negative blood, eaten the free crackers they offered, and gone home on the 6:20 bus. She never asked who received it. She never left her phone number for thanks. She never wrote her name on anything except the donation form. 3 floors above her, Julian's 7-year-old son, Noah Rourke, had lived another month each time. Noah had a rare blood disorder that made his own body destroy what it needed to survive. Without matched transfusions, his skin turned gray, his lips lost color, and the monitors around his bed began speaking in alarms. Doctors had explained it to Julian with careful words, but fear had translated everything into one sentence. His child needed blood that almost no one had. Julian had built Veriton Medical Systems, a company worth billions, on machines that could detect childhood illnesses earlier than any human eye. His name had appeared on hospital wings, research grants, glossy conference banners, and expensive charity dinners. He had spent years being praised for saving children he would never meet. But his own son was alive because of a woman he had stepped around in hallways. Amara did not know he was watching her. She kept working slowly, pressing the rag into the red smear near room 712, where Noah had been treated earlier that night after another crisis. The room was private, quiet, and expensive. There were soft blankets inside, framed watercolor prints on the walls, and a window facing the river. Outside the door, Amara was on the floor. A nurse had spilled part of a blood sample during the emergency. Marcus Weil, Amara's supervisor, had pointed at the stain in front of 3 residents and said, "Since you like blood so much, clean it properly this time." The residents had looked away. Amara had lowered herself to the tile without answering. She had learned years ago that silence could be armor, but that night silence felt more like a bruise. At the end of the hallway, Julian's hand tightened around the small folded drawing in his coat pocket. Noah had given it to him that afternoon. A crayon picture of a woman with brown hands holding a red heart. Across the top, in crooked letters, Noah had written, "Blood Lady." Julian had smiled when Noah showed it to him. He had thought it was a child's imaginary hero, the way sick children turn medicine into magic. Then an hour earlier, he had overheard 2 blood bank nurses whispering near the stairwell. Amara came in again. She is the only steady AB negative donor we have. 24 months, never missed. That Rourke boy would not be here without her. Now Julian was looking at the woman from those whispers. The woman on the floor. The woman Marcus had just humiliated. The woman whose blood had been inside Noah's body for 2 years. Amara dipped the rag into the bucket. The water turned pink. She wrung it out with hands that trembled slightly, not from fear, but from exhaustion. She had donated early that week, against advice, because the blood bank had run out during Noah's crisis. Her iron was low. Her head still floated when she stood too quickly. Marcus appeared from a side corridor with a clipboard pressed to his chest. He did not see Julian in the shadows. He looked down at Amara and said, loud enough for anyone nearby to hear, "When you finish pretending to be noble, there are 6 more rooms waiting. You are not a nurse. You are not a doctor. You are not important. You clean what important people leave behind." Amara's hand stopped for half a second. Then she kept scrubbing. Julian felt something inside him collapse. Not anger first, shame, because Marcus had only said out loud what Julian had practiced quietly for years. He had walked past people like Amara, as if they belonged to the floor, the carts, the trash bags, the closing doors. Then Noah's small voice came from behind him. "Dad?" Julian turned. His son stood in the doorway of room 712, pale but awake, one hand gripping the IV pole, the other holding the doorframe. Noah looked past his father and saw Amara on the floor. His face changed. "That's her," Noah whispered. Julian could barely speak. "Who?" Noah lifted one weak finger toward Amara. "The blood lady." Amara looked up then. For the first time, her eyes met Julian Rourke's, and everything Mercy Vale Children's Hospital had kept separate. For 2 years became impossible to separate any longer. 2 years earlier, Amara Bell had donated blood because the rain was too heavy to catch the bus. That was the small accident that changed everything. She had finished a double shift at Mercy Vale and stood beneath the awning at 7:14 in the morning, watching rain beat the pavement silver. Her umbrella had broken 3 nights before. Her shoes were already wet. The next bus was late, and the blood bank sign glowed softly down the hall behind her. Rare donors needed. Amara had seen signs like that all her life. Her mother, Lena Bell, had taken her to her first blood drive when Amara was 17. Back then, Amara had wanted to be a doctor with the fierce certainty of a girl who believed hard work could outrun poverty. Lena had cleaned offices, folded laundry, cooked for neighbors, and saved coins in coffee tins to buy used science books. At that first blood drive, Amara had been afraid of the needle. Lena had held her hand and said, "Blood is the one thing God gave rich and poor in the same color. If yours can save somebody, don't make it wait for permission." Amara never forgot it. Years later, she was no longer in medical school. She had left in her final year after Lena's kidneys failed, and the bills began arriving with numbers that seemed invented to punish the poor. Amara became a certified nursing assistant because the training was fast and the hospital offered insurance. She told herself it was temporary. Temporary became 1 year, then 3, then 7. At Mercy Vale, she changed sheets, emptied basins, cleaned wheelchairs, took temperatures, lifted children whose bones felt like birds, and sat with frightened parents when nurses were busy. Doctors entered rooms with authority. Nurses entered with medication. Amara entered with warm blankets and plastic cups of water, and the kind of patience that never appeared on charts. Children remembered her. Administrators did not. Her supervisor, Marcus Vale, believed the hospital ran best when support staff moved like shadows. He had started as a janitor 20 years earlier and climbed into management by never missing a rule, never challenging a doctor, never comforting anyone longer than policy allowed. He treated tenderness like theft. Every extra minute Amara spent with a child became, in his eyes, stolen time. He wrote her up for sitting beside a 6-year-old after a nightmare. He wrote her up for humming to a toddler during a linen change. He wrote her up for taking 10 minutes to help an elderly grandmother find the cafeteria after visiting hours. Each warning used the same phrase: fails to maintain role boundaries. Amara kept the papers folded in a shoebox at home, beside unpaid bills and old medical school notebooks she could not throw away. Still, once a month she gave blood, AB negative. The nurse at the blood bank, Ruth Calder, had told her how rare it was. Fewer than 1 person in 100 had it. Hospitals were always short. Children with complex diseases often needed exact matches. A steady donor mattered more than Amara knew. Amara had smiled and said she did not need to know. That was true at first. She did not need a name to keep donating. She only needed to know there was need. Then she met Noah, not as the boy receiving her blood, not as the billionaire's son, not as anybody important. She met him as a child who could not sleep. Room 712 was on the private pediatric floor, a place Amara usually entered after families had gone quiet and wealthy fear had settled into expensive furniture. Noah was 5 then, small for his age, with eyes too serious for his face. He had a rocket-shaped nightlight beside his bed and a stack of drawings under his pillow. The first time Amara found him awake, he was staring at the ceiling while a transfusion bag hung beside him. She should have emptied the trash and moved on. Instead, she asked if the beeping bothered him. Noah nodded. Amara stayed 5 minutes, then 10. She told him about the little river behind the apartment building where she had grown up and how she used to pretend leaves were boats carrying messages. Noah listened with both hands tucked under his blanket. Before she left, he asked if stories could stay in a room after the person telling them left. Amara said yes. After that, whenever Noah saw her during night shift, he called her Miss Amara. Sometimes he showed her drawings. Sometimes he asked about rivers. Sometimes he spoke about the Blood Lady. The Blood Lady was what he called the anonymous donor who helped him feel strong after transfusions. Julian had told him someone kind gave blood so he could keep fighting. Noah imagined this person as a tall woman with red light in her hands. One night he drew her. Brown skin, big hands, red heart. Amara had looked at the picture and felt a strange ache. She did not connect it to herself. Why would she? Hospitals are full of invisible connections. She was only a tired CNA standing beside a child's bed with a trash bag in one hand. But Ruth Calder, the blood bank nurse, noticed something months later. Amara's donation schedule matched Noah Rourke's transfusion schedule almost perfectly. Ruth said nothing. Confidentiality was not a decoration. It protected donors from being hunted by desperate families and wealthy fathers. But from then on, whenever Amara came in after a shift, Ruth looked at her differently, with respect and with worry, because Amara was getting thinner. Lena's condition had worsened. Dialysis drained her 3 times a week. Medications cost more than rent. Amara worked extra shifts until her hands cramped around mop handles. She skipped meals and called it being too busy. She taped the inside of her shoes when the soles began to split. When Ruth warned her that frequent donations required good nutrition and rest, Amara laughed softly. Rest was a beautiful idea. Nutrition was expensive. Then, in late winter, Mercy Vale's blood supply dropped dangerously low after a regional shortage. Noah's body entered crisis without warning. His hemoglobin fell fast. The first call went to the blood bank. The second went to regional storage. The third went nowhere useful. There was no AB negative blood available. Ruth found Amara in a supply closet folding sheets. She did not tell Amara the child's name. She only said there was a pediatric emergency, and the hospital had no match. Amara looked down at the clean sheets in her arms. She had donated just 26 days earlier, too soon. Unsafe, against normal guidelines, Ruth told her that. Amara listened. Then she said, "If a child is dying while I have what he needs, the calendar can be angry with me later." They tested her hemoglobin. It was barely acceptable. Ruth hesitated. Dr. Elaine Sorrell, Noah's hematologist, came down herself. She recognized Amara from late-night rounds and understood the shape of the moral disaster in front of her. A poor woman being asked by circumstance to give what a billionaire could not buy. Dr. Sorrell explained the risks. Dizziness, weakness, anemia, collapse. Amara nodded. The needle went in. 3 floors above, Noah's lips were turning blue around the edges. 3 floors below, Amara stared at the ceiling and whispered her mother's sentence. Blood is the one thing God gave rich and poor in the same color. Within the hour, Noah's breathing steadied. Julian wept beside the bed, thanking a person he did not know. Amara fainted in the staff locker room 40 minutes later and told everyone she had skipped breakfast. Marcus did not believe her. He saw weakness as inconvenience. He saw inconvenience as disrespect. And when he learned she had gone to the blood bank during shift transition, without clearing it through him, he added another warning to her file. Unauthorized absence from assigned floor. No one asked whose life the absence had saved. That was how the trap began closing around Amara Bell. The hospital board meeting was supposed to be about money. It became about blood. Julian Rourke sat at the long walnut table on the top floor of Mercy Vale Children's Hospital, listening to executives discuss donor strategy, expansion plans, and the new Veriton-funded Pediatric Research Center. He heard phrases like patient-centered excellence and frontline resilience. He had learned that rich institutions often use soft words to hide hard indifference. Across the room, Marcus Vale presented a staffing efficiency report. He spoke smoothly, with charts and percentages. Support staff overtime was too high. Emotional boundary violations were increasing. Certain employees, he said, created workflow drag by confusing compassion with clinical duty. Julian barely listened until Marcus clicked to the next slide. There was Amara's name. Amara Bell, CNA, night shift. Beneath it were warnings, missed room logs, delay notes, and a recommendation for termination. Julian straightened. Marcus explained that Amara had a history of leaving assigned areas, lingering in patient rooms, and interfering with emotional care better left to licensed staff. He said she meant well, but Mercy Vale could not run on sentiment. Then he added that wealthy families in the private wing expected professionalism, not support staff forming attachments. Julian looked at the slide and felt the hallway return to him. The bucket, the rag, the blood on the floor. Marcus saying she was not important, Dr. Sorrel, seated near the end of the table, went still. Ruth Calder was not at the meeting. Support staff were not invited to rooms where their futures were discussed. Marcus continued. He said, Amara had recently become physically unreliable. Dizziness, slow movement, reduced at pace. He implied she might be hiding a medical issue. He recommended immediate suspension pending review. A board member asked if she was replaceable. Marcus smiled slightly. All support roles are replaceable when standards are clear. Julian looked at him then, really looked at him. For years, Julian had believed cruelty announced itself loudly. He was beginning to understand that sometimes cruelty came dressed as efficiency. He asked one question. Does this employee work near my son's room? Marcus seemed pleased to have the attention of the hospital's largest donor. Yes, Mr. Rourke. Unfortunately, she has been assigned to that floor several times despite concerns. We can make sure she is kept away from your family going forward. Julian's voice remained quiet. Why would you do that? Marcus blinked. Because we want your son's care environment protected. Protected. The word sat in the room like something spoiled. Before Julian could answer, Dr. Sorrel closed her folder. She did not reveal donor information. She could not. But she said every hospital should be careful before dismissing the people who notice what machines miss. Marcus countered that sentiment was not evidence. That phrase would return later. Sentiment is not evidence. By that afternoon, Amara's badge stopped working. She found out when she tried to enter the staff locker room, and the little red light blinked against her. At first, she thought the card reader was broken. Then Marcus appeared behind her holding a sealed envelope. Administrative suspension. Pending termination review. She was not accused of theft, not exactly. Not accused of harm, not exactly. The letter used polished language that made humiliation sound clean. Pattern of boundary violations. Unauthorized floor movement. Failure to complete assigned duties. Concerns regarding physical fitness for role. Amara read it twice. Her first thought was not about herself. It was about Lena's dialysis payment due Friday. Her second thought was Noah, whose next transfusion was scheduled in 10 days. She asked Marcus whether she could at least keep her donor appointment. Marcus gave a small laugh. You are free to donate on your own time, Miss Bell. Just don't confuse that with employment. He turned to leave. Then he paused and looked at her badge. Hand that over. Amara removed it slowly. The plastic clip stuck to her sweater. Her name swung once before she placed it in his palm. Marcus dropped it into the trash can beside the nurse's station. That was the moment Noah saw. He was being wheeled back from imaging by an orderly. He looked pale under a blanket. His small hands curled in his lap. He saw Marcus throw away Amara's badge. He saw Amara standing very still. He saw the nurses pretend not to see. Later, when Julian visited, Noah asked why bad people threw away names. Julian did not understand. Not yet. At home, Amara found her mother sitting at the kitchen table with a blanket around her shoulders and a stack of bills in front of her. Lena's face had become sharper in the last month, as if illness were carving her down to essentials. Amara tried to hide the suspension letter. Lena held out her hand. Mothers always know where pain is hidden. She read silently. When she finished, she did not curse Marcus. She did not tell Amara everything would be fine. She only asked, "Did you do wrong?" Amara shook her head. "Then don't let their paper become your mirror." That night, Amara almost did not go to the blood bank. She sat on the edge of her bed in the dark, looking at the bruise inside her elbow from the last emergency donation. Her body was tired. Her job was gone. Her mother needed a transplant evaluation they could no longer afford. And somewhere in Mercy Vale, a child whose last name she still did not know would soon need blood again. She could stop. No one would blame her because no one knew. That was the cruel freedom of anonymity. You could disappear from your own goodness, and the world would never have enough information to accuse you. At 5:40 the next morning, Amara took 2 buses to Mercy Vale, not to work, to donate. Security stopped her at the employee entrance because her badge was gone. She walked around to the public lobby like any visitor. Marcus saw her from the balcony above the atrium and came down fast. He told her suspended employees could not wander clinical areas. Amara said she was not there as an employee. She was there as a donor. For the first time, Marcus looked uncertain, not ashamed, only annoyed by a rule he did not control. The blood bank accepted public donors. He could not legally stop her, but he could embarrass her. In the lobby, in front of visitors and staff, he said, "Some people will do anything to feel needed." The words landed hard. Amara looked up at him. For a second, she wanted to say everything. She wanted to say that need was not weakness, that children do not survive on job titles, that his clipboard had never held a frightened hand at 3 in the morning. Instead, she walked past him. Ruth saw her enter and nearly cried with relief. But the donation did not go smoothly. Amara's hemoglobin was low, too low for a full donation under standard rules. Ruth could not take the blood. Amara sat in the chair, stunned. She had come prepared to give, and for the first time, her own body refused. Ruth squeezed her hand and said, "The shortage registry would be checked again. There might be another donor in Cedar County. Maybe a unit could be transported. Maybe. Hospitals are full of. Maybe." Amara left through the side exit so Marcus would not see her crying. 2 days later, Noah crashed. His numbers dropped faster than expected. The Cedar County unit was delayed after a transport accident during heavy rain. The hospital had no compatible blood in the building. Julian stood beside Noah's bed while doctors moved around him with controlled urgency. He watched his son's hands go cold. He watched Dr. Sorrell's calm face become less calm. Then Noah, barely awake, whispered something. "Call Miss Amara." Julian leaned closer. "What did you say?" Noah's eyes opened just enough to find him. "Miss Amara knows the blood lady." Julian felt the words pass through him like a key turning in a lock. The badge in the trash, the drawing. The nurse's whispers he had half dismissed days earlier. Amara's name on Marcus's slide, the suspended CNA, the blood lady. He left Noah's room and walked straight to the blood bank. Ruth Calder looked up from her desk and saw a billionaire father, entering with the face of a man who had finally understood too late. He asked one question. "Is Amara Bell my son's donor?" Ruth's eyes filled with fear. Confidentiality held the room like a locked door. She said she could not answer. Julian looked at the donor wall beside the desk. Most names were anonymous numbers, but one card had fallen slightly behind the frame. It was not a legal record. It was a child's thank you note. Noah had drawn months earlier, and Ruth had pinned there without names. A brown woman with a red heart, same drawing style, same hands. Julian did not need Ruth to answer. The truth had already begun speaking through everything everyone thought was too small to matter. The first crack in the wall was not a document. It was a child's memory. Noah survived that crisis because the delayed unit arrived minutes before the doctors would have been forced into a dangerous emergency procedure. His recovery was slower than usual. He slept almost 18 hours, and when he woke, Julian was sitting beside him with the crayon drawing unfolded on his lap. Noah told him what he had seen. Miss Amara telling stories at night. Miss Amara tucking the blanket around his feet when the room got cold. Miss Samara looking at the blood lady drawing and touching the red heart with one finger. Miss Amara's badge thrown away. Julian listened without interrupting. Children do not understand hospital politics. That was why they sometimes describe truth better than adults. The second crack came from Dr. Sorrell. She came to Julian's office the next morning with no files in her hands. Because files could not say what she needed to say, she still did not break donor confidentiality. She did not name Amara as the donor. Instead, she told Julian about the rules. Rules existed to protect people with less power from people with more. A desperate father could become dangerous without meaning to. A rich family could turn gratitude into pressure. A hospital could look at a poor woman's blood and begin treating her body like an inventory supply. Then Dr. Sorrell said something Julian never forgot. The question is not whether you are grateful, Mr. Rourke. The question is whether your gratitude will leave her freer than it found her. That sentence stopped him, because his first instinct had been to fix everything with money. Pay her mother's bills, pay her tuition, pay her rent, pay until guilt quieted down. But money, given carelessly, could become another form of ownership. The third crack came from Marcus. Julian requested Amara's personnel file. Marcus hesitated, then produced it with the confidence of a man who believed paperwork could bury context. Warning after warning, delays, boundary violations, unauthorized absences, emotional over-involvement, failure to maintain role. Julian read every page. A 6-minute delay in room 418 on March 3. That was the night Noah had told him a woman sang softly to a baby down the hall, after the baby's mother fell asleep sitting upright. A 12-minute delay in room 605 on June 19. That was the night a little girl with a feeding tube had stopped crying. Only after Amara found the stuffed rabbit lost under a linen cart. Unauthorized movement to blood bank on September 11th. That was the emergency donation that had saved Noah from organ failure. Marcus had documented Amara's compassion as misconduct because he did not have a category for grace. Julian asked him why the September absence had not been reviewed more carefully. Marcus replied, "Sentiment is not evidence." Julian stood from his chair. "No," he said quietly, "but patterns are." He ordered a formal review. This time, support staff were invited, not as decorations, as witnesses. The hearing took place in a hospital conference room, with windows overlooking the ambulance bay. Amara attended because Dr. Sorrell asked her to, not because she wanted to defend herself. She wore a plain navy sweater and held her hands folded, so no one would see them shaking. Marcus sat opposite her with his file. Julian sat at the head of the table, but he did not speak first. Ruth Calder did. She explained rare blood shortages in general terms. She explained how regular anonymous donor slot kept children alive, without ever knowing their names. She explained that donor health could be damaged by pressure, poverty, poor nutrition, and overwork. Then she looked at Amara and stopped before saying too much. Her silence was evidence too. A transporter named Luis spoke next. He said Amara had once ridden an elevator up and down for 20 minutes, with a child terrified of surgery, because the child believed elevators were safer than operating rooms. A cafeteria worker said Amara had paid for a mother's soup with quarters from her own coat pocket. A night nurse said Amara noticed Noah's breathing change before the monitor alarmed and called for help at exactly the right time. Marcus objected that none of this changed the performance record. Then Dr. Sorrell placed a copy of Noah's care timeline on the table. It contained no donor names. It violated no privacy rule. It simply showed dates, transfusion dates, crisis dates, blood bank emergency dates. Beside it, Julian placed Marcus's disciplinary timeline. The two sets of dates lined up like a confession. Every time Marcus accused Amara of leaving her post, a pediatric rare blood crisis had occurred. Every time he called her unreliable, someone else's child had become more stable. The room went quiet. Marcus looked at the papers. For the first time, his confidence faltered. Amara did not smile. She looked tired. Then Julian took Noah's drawing from his folder and set it on the table. A brown woman, big hands, red heart. He did not say Amara was the donor. He did not need to. He said only, "My son drew this before any adult in this room understood what he was seeing." Marcus stared at the drawing. The final irreversible truth arrived not through Julian but through Amara. She stood slowly. Everyone turned toward her, and for a moment she seemed smaller under all those eyes. Then she spoke in the calm voice of a woman who had spent years swallowing pain until it became discipline. She said she had donated blood for many years because her mother taught her that blood was not property. She said she had never asked who received it because goodness should not require an audience. She said she had stayed with children at night because fear does not follow staffing charts. She said she had made mistakes, but caring too much was not one of them. Then she looked at Marcus. You told me I clean what important people leave behind, but sometimes what they leave behind is the only place truth is still visible. No one moved. Marcus lowered his eyes first. It was not enough. It would never be enough. But it was the first honest thing he had done all day. Julian asked Amara what she wanted. The room expected her to say money. She did not. She asked for her job record to be corrected. She asked for Ruth's rare donor program to be funded properly. She asked for support staff to receive emergency health protections if they donated blood or worked double shifts. She asked for CNAs to be included in patient care briefings for children they served every night. She asked for living wages. Finally, after a long silence, she asked for one more thing, not for herself, for her mother. She asked that Mercy Vale review charity care applications for transplant families who fell into the cruel gap between being poor enough to suffer and not poor enough to qualify. Julian listened. This time he did not interrupt with promises. He wrote everything down. The hearing ended with Amara's suspension lifted and Marcus placed on administrative leave pending investigation. But Amara did not walk out victorious. Real dignity is quieter than victory. She walked down to the lobby alone. Julian followed at a respectful distance. Near the exit, he caught up and said he was sorry. Amara did not make it easy for him. She said apology was not the same as change. Julian nodded. Then he asked if Noah could meet the Blood Lady, only if Amara wanted that, and only when she was ready. Amara looked through the glass doors at the grey afternoon outside. Her bus was approaching the stop. Her mother would be waiting at home. Her arm still carried a fading bruise. After a moment she had said, Noah already met me. That is what everyone missed. Then she stepped outside. Julian watched her walk toward the bus. This time, he did not look through her. Change did not arrive as one grand speech. It arrived as policy meetings, budget fights, angry emails, union conversations, revised schedules, legal reviews, and hospital executives, learning that conscience is expensive when it has been delayed too long. Julian funded the Bell Rare Blood Registry, but he did not name it after Amara until she agreed. The registry allowed rare donors to opt in privately, receive health monitoring, nutrition support, transportation help, and safe donation scheduling. No family could contact them directly. No wealthy parent could buy their name. Gratitude would no longer become pressure. Ruth Calder became its director. Dr. Sorrell helped design protections for repeat donors. Amara insisted on one rule. No donor would ever be praised publicly without consent, and no donor would ever be asked to give early unless their own health came first. Julian also created the Frontline Care Fund at Mercy Vale. The first changes were practical. Raises for CNAs, transporters, aides, cleaners, and cafeteria workers. Paid recovery time after blood donation. Emergency grants for medical bills. A seat for support staff in patient care meetings when their observations mattered. The board resisted. Julian reminded them that the new research center still required his signature. Resistance became cooperation. Marcus resigned before the investigation ended. He did not go to prison. He was not dragged through the lobby. Life is rarely that theatrical, but his personnel notes were reviewed, and dozens of support staff records were corrected. Some people received back pay. Some received apologies. Some received only the bitter comfort of being believed too late. Amara returned to work, but everything felt different. Not easy. Different. Some staff treated her with awkward reverence. She disliked that almost as much as being ignored. She did not want to become a hospital legend people used to avoid fixing normal cruelty. She wanted people to say good morning to the woman pushing the linen cart. She wanted nurses to ask CNAs what they noticed. She wanted children to be comforted without someone calling it inefficiency. Noah recovered slowly through that spring. One afternoon, Amara visited him in daylight for the first time. She wore her own clothes, not scrubs. A soft blue sweater, clean jeans, her hair loose around her shoulders. She stood in the doorway of room 712, feeling strangely shy. Noah looked up from his coloring book. For a second, he frowned in confusion. He knew her as night, as quiet footsteps, as stories beside machines. Then recognition lit his face. "Miss Amara." She crossed the room. Julian stood by the window and said nothing. Noah reached under his pillow and pulled out the old drawing, the blood lady with the red heart. The paper was creased from being handled too often. He held it out to her. "I saved it until you came." Amara took it with both hands. People had given her paychecks, warnings, bills, expired coupons, bus transfers, and hospital forms. No one had ever given her anything like that drawing. Noah asked if she was really the blood lady. Amara sat beside his bed. She told him she was Amara first. A person, a daughter, a worker, a woman who loved stories, a donor sometimes, not magic, not a hero from a picture, just someone whose blood matched his. Noah listened seriously. Then he said, "That is better than magic." Julian turned toward the window because he did not want his son to see him cry. Months passed. Lena Bell received a kidney transplant through Mercy Vale's expanded charity care program. The donor remained anonymous. Amara tried not to suspect Julian had influenced the process, but she knew he had helped build the doorway her mother walked through. When she thanked him, he corrected her. He said Amara had told him where the wall was. He had only paid to knock it down. That answer mattered, because it did not make him her rescuer. It made him responsible. A year later, Amara opened an envelope from Northbridge Medical College, a fictional school she had once dreamed about while studying under library lights with vending machine coffee beside her. She had applied through the new Lena Bell Scholarship for frontline healthcare workers. Full tuition, living stipend, health insurance, no donor influence over admission, no debt disguised as generosity. She read the acceptance letter at the kitchen table. Lena sat across from her, wrapped in a yellow cardigan, stronger now, still thin, still fierce. Amara read the first line 3 times. Then she put her head down on the table and cried, not because the dream was new, because it had waited. On her first day of medical school, Amara was 36 years old. Younger students rushed past her with laptops, water bottles, and the careless confidence of people whose lives had not yet been interrupted. Amara carried a second-hand backpack and the blood lady drawing tucked safely inside a folder. In anatomy lab, when the professor spoke about blood supply, Amara thought of Noah. In ethics class, when students debated patient privacy, she thought of Dr. Sorrell refusing to sell a name. In clinical training, when a tired CNA entered the room quietly, Amara always turned and introduced herself first. She never forgot what invisibility felt like. Years later, the final image did not happen in a hospital boardroom or at a charity gala. It happened on a bright Saturday morning in a medical school auditorium. Amara Bell walked across the stage in a black gown with green trim. Her mother watched from the front row, one hand pressed to her chest. Ruth Calder sat beside Dr. Sorrell. Julian sat 2 seats down, older now, quieter. Beside him was Noah, taller, healthy, holding a frame against his knees. When Amara's name was called with the title Doctor before it, the applause rose in a way that startled even the dean. Dr. Amara Bell, Pediatric Hematology, the study of blood diseases in children. Amara accepted the diploma and looked out over the audience. For one moment, she saw everything at once. The floors, the buckets, the night bus, the blood bank chair, her mother's thin hands, Marcus throwing away her badge, Noah's pale face, Julian standing at the end of a hallway, finally seeing what had been in front of him all along. Then Noah stood. He lifted the frame. Inside was the original crayon drawing. Brown hands, red heart, Blood lady. The room blurred. Amara did not need to say anything. Her hands held the diploma. Those same hands had scrubbed floors, steadied sick children, signed donation forms, held her mother through dialysis, and opened her own veins month after month for a child she did not know she knew. Now they would hold a stethoscope, but they would never forget the floor. Some people save lives from operating rooms. Some save lives from laboratories. Some save lives with money, machines, research, and powerful signatures. And some save lives quietly after 12-hour shifts, with cracked hands, tired feet, and no one waiting to thank them. Amara's story asks a simple question that is not always comfortable. How many people do we walk past every day because their work looks ordinary? The cleaner in the hallway, the aide changing sheets, the driver waiting in the rain, the woman behind the counter, the person who holds everything together while being treated as replaceable. Kindness does not become small because it is unseen. Sometimes unseen kindness is the only reason someone else gets another morning. And gratitude, when it finally arrives, should not turn the giver into property. It should make the world around them more just. So here is the question for you. Who is someone in your life that deserves to be seen before the world is forced to notice them? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this story moved you, subscribe for more emotional stories about hidden truth, dignity, sacrifice, and the quiet people who change everything.